Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cait Take podcast. I'm your host, Cait Brown, and I am beyond thrilled to sit here with my guest today. I am sitting here with Danny Pellegrino, and if you don't know who Danny is, well, you probably know who Danny is if you know me in real life, because I'm always like, are you listening to Danny's podcast? Have you read Danny's book? But guys, Danny is absolutely amazing. He lives out in LA, and he is the host of the Everything Iconic podcast. He is a New York Times bestselling author of the book, How Do I Unremember This? And he is in my ears weekly with his amazing Bravo recaps and all fun pop culture over on his podcast. And he's a dream guest of mine. So Danny, welcome.
Cait, thank you so much. I'm blushing. What an honor. And also, I'm a Midwest gal at heart. I'm from Ohio. And so I apologize to the listeners in advance. I feel like my hard A's are going to come out. Your hard A's are already out. I feel like we're just going to be doing a lot of like cat work. And
Yep. Well, and
I love it,
it's like, when you're with like my girlfriends who live on the East Coast, when I'm with them, they're like, oh my God, you sound like such a Minnesotan. I'm like, no, I don't. And then when I'm with them, I'm like, oh yeah, that is bad.
My Cleveland comes out. Most of the people that I tend to gravitate towards here on the West Coast tend to be from the Midwest somehow. And so I feel like when I get together with my friends here, it's like the hard A's come out, the pop comes out instead of soda. I don't know, all of that stuff.
I love it.
So anyway, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you, and I'm happy we were finally able to do this. I know we were talking on Instagram, and so I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I've been fangirling over Danny, you guys, for years. Anyone who knows me, like I said, I have been committed. I joke with my husband, I've been committed to the Real Housewives longer than him. And so somehow Danny's podcast came into my sphere a few years ago, and just a loyal listener. And so I know I could say all these fun facts I know about you, Danny, just from following along with you. But can you just tell my listeners a little bit about who you are? How did you go from being an Ohio gal, as you call it, to now in Los Angeles with this top rated podcast? I mean, Danny, your podcast is crushing it, and being a New York Times bestseller. So just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I love that you listen to my show, and I always hear from women whose husbands sort of like hear it, or sometimes the women will reach out to me and say, I snuck in on my husband listening to you. So I feel like they're sort of the underground accidental listeners, but yes. I love when I hear that, because I'm a big gay from Ohio. And so I love when I hear from the straight husbands who are listening to it. Yes. But anyway, I lived in Ohio. I grew up in Solon, which is just outside of Cleveland. And then I moved to Chicago, and I was doing improv and sketch comedy at places like Second City and the I.O. Theater in Chicago. I moved out here to LA for the entertainment industry, and I studied at the Groundlings here, and I started doing stand-up comedy. And things just weren't really going great. And I was doing these shows, especially in sketch and improv. I was doing these shows at 11 p.m. at night, or I would do a stand-up show at 11 p.m. at night for, tens of people in the audience. And it was just challenging. And I had gone through some personal struggles. I had lost someone in my family very close to me, and I had a career switch, or a job that I had lost. And so I fell into this depression, and I thought for sure at that point I had given up entertainment. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to get on stage again. I'm done. And I was contemplating moving back to the Midwest. And a friend, as I was sort of coming out of my depression, my friend had told me about starting a podcast. And I remember she recommended it because she's like, you could perform without leaving your house. So if the getting on the stage is the hard part for you, which it was at that time, she's like, you could do your kind of bits on the podcast and start it. And so around that time, I was also focusing on growing my social media. And so I was making a lot of memes on my Instagram account, and most of them tended to be like Housewives or Bravo related, or I was doing a lot of pop culture stuff too, but I'd say it was mostly a lot of Bravo heavy stuff. And so I had gained a little bit of a following of people who liked The Real Housewives and who liked Bravo. And so it seemed like a natural progression to start a podcast. And so the podcast really was, especially at the beginning and still now, kind of a mix of recaps of Bravo TV shows, but then I also cover pop culture. I interview celebrity guests and stuff like that. So, but that's kind of how the podcast started, was because of this idea of I could do it from home and I could still do my comedy bits or whatever and be creative in that way. And then also it encouraged me to keep building my social media. And so I was able to be creative because I've also always been a writer. And so I was able to write sort of little joke nuggets or little jokes or captions or make content, which I found to be very creative. And so, especially early on, and I always tell this, not that I'm some huge expert, but if anyone asks for advice or anything, I think the most important things in terms of content creation is consistency.
Yeah.
And I think with podcasting too, you just have to, you have to, people want to make you part of their routine, but you have to make it easy for them. So for instance, when I was making Instagram memes, which I don't do as much anymore, but for probably 3 or 4 years, I was so committed to doing one meme a day. And so it was essentially writing one joke a day for Instagram specifically, and then also building the other platforms as well. But I was focused on Instagram, and I wouldn't miss a day. I mean, every single day I was making and pulling clips and trying to think of a funny caption and a joke or whatever. And now I tend to just use my Instagram as just a creative expression of like, oh, I like this clip from this movie or something like that. So because it is so time consuming to be that creative. And I know it's hard. And whenever I see someone, trying to build, especially on social media, it's much more work than I think people realize to make those memes and GIFs and or GIFs or whatever I think it's GIFs, but I call
I
them
always say it
GIFs.
wrong too.
Yeah. But it's a lot of work and it's time consuming. And so, but I was committed to that for a couple of years. And so the podcast grew. At the time, I was also ghostwriting. So I was writing other people's books for celebrity authors. And I knew that I wanted to write my own book one day. That was also always a goal of mine since I was a kid. And so eventually when the podcast grew enough, when the social media and stuff grew enough, then I was able to take my book out to an agent and then to a publisher and get a publishing deal. And so that it all sort of grew in tandem, I suppose. Did I answer the question, Cait?
No, I think I love it. And I think so much of what stood out to me when you were even just saying that was, it's not like it was linear success. There was ups, there was downs. You almost started what you're doing now in a down moment of depression and things like that. And so I think that's just like really important for myself to hear and other people to hear, because sometimes I think we think success is just so linear and it's so easy, when in reality there are setbacks, there are, and consistent, and it's work, it's like, especially like coming from the Midwest, maybe you relate to this, like to this day, my grandma is like, what do you do? And I'm like, I don't really know how to explain building a business on social media, but I'll do my best.
It's impossible and no one gets it. And you just have to stay your course and understand that you're doing it. I also think it's very important to pivot when the world is sort of showing you signs to pivot. I talk about that depression moment because there was about a month that I was very seriously clinically depressed and I couldn't even get out of bed. And I just was like, at that time, I was going to a place called the Groundlings here, which is where a lot of like SNL people had gone through. And sort of at the end of the program, which I had done this program for years and years and years, and you sort of put your whole life into this program. And then at a certain point, they either essentially let you go from the program or they let you continue on. And I was let go from the program and I was just like devastated because it was years. And that was always in my head. Oh, I'm going to do the Groundlings. I remember when I was in high school, speaking of Midwest, Molly Shannon's from Shaker Heights, Ohio. And when I was in high school, I met her. She was at a restaurant and my friend who worked nearby was like, Molly Shannon's at this restaurant. So me and a friend, like we drove up there. I was like, Molly, I love you. I want to be on SNL and all this stuff. And she was like, oh, well, go to the Groundlings, go to Second City. And so I was like, okay, and I did it. So I always, that was my plan. And of course it's crazy. And I look back on it and I was like, what was I thinking? Like I just assumed that was how it would go. And so then when I was cut from the Groundlings Theater, I realized like I had to pivot. And I look back now and sort of wish I would have pivoted sooner. I think I was just so held tight to this idea that I had in my head of how things were supposed to go. But the most success that I've had were in areas that I would never expected 10 years ago. I mean, I always wanted to write a book, but I never anticipated myself ghostwriting. I sort of fell into that in a weird way. And all of these good things that came, all these career successes that I've had really came from that moment of depression, because when I was coming out of that, I started going to the gym a lot. And I was like, I became obsessed because you do all those things people tell you. You meditate, you journal, you work out. And so I started going to this workout class where I met this guy, Bob Harper, who's from this show, The Biggest Loser. And he was looking for a writer. And so him and I had developed a good friendship, and then he was looking for a writer. And so I would have never met him and found this opportunity to ghostwrite if that didn't happen. And so I don't know, all these things. And then I thought I had given up performing on stage. And then now, as the show has taken off, I've done like live shows for my podcast, and I've gotten to travel the country, and I didn't think I'd ever perform again. And now it's sort of, the podcast brought me back to that. So the world sort of works in mysterious ways, and what's meant to be will be yours if you kind of accept the pivots and stay, but while also staying true to you and staying your course and what you like. And I don't know, it's challenging though. It's really hard, I think, when you're in one of those low points to see that there's a path where everything will work out okay.
I love that so much. And honestly, that's kind of where I feel like I'm at right now. Sometimes in life is like the shoulds of, oh, I should be here. I should be there. This should have happened already. And so it's like really refreshing to hear you say that, because sometimes it is that messy middle that, it makes you prepared for, if all this had fallen into your lap, when you were in the throes of that depression or this or that, you wouldn't have been, when it's Rosie O'Donnell's ready to come on your podcast, you would have been like, holy shit, and it's like, then when those opportunities came your way, you're, maybe more equipped to handle them.
I think the hardest thing right now because of social media is we're so easy to compare ourselves to other people. And I still do this now, but you look at other people and you say, well, why does that person have this? And I'm still stuck in this spot. And I don't think that ever ends. I think it just sort of, it always is with you, and you just have to stay your own thing and know that your life is your life, and there's no timeline. But it's hard when you hop on Instagram or Twitter or something and you see someone, oh, they're doing this crazy, amazing thing. And you're like, well, how do they have that opportunity? Like, did they earn it, or and it's so easy to compare or to see a friend who's in another field. Sometimes I remember in my 20s, especially, like I would look at friends, particularly friends I grew up in Ohio, who had a different career path than I did. And so they were starting to be able to buy houses and start families in their 20s. And I felt like I was so far behind them. And it's just impossible when you're comparing like that, it's so hard. And I could sit here and say, everyone who's listening, stop comparing to other people. Just try to outdo your best, or try to do your best. But it's easier said than done, because everyone is on their phone all day and looking at other people and saying like, oh man,
damn it. Like, what is she doing? Or he doing? So I think that makes me curious, Danny, what would be your advice to the person listening to this to like really stay true to yourself? Because I think that's something you do so beautifully. Like, if anyone listens to your podcast, you're Danny, like your soundboard and your Ash Wednesdays and all these things that make you. Like, I feel like you've stayed really true to yourself. How do we do that without fear of judgment?
Oh, well, see, I think you have to have fear of judgment. You just will have fear of judgment. I think people will judge, and no matter what they're going to judge. So at least if you're being you, I'd rather have someone judge me for me than judging me for being someone else.
Yes.
And I think the biggest tip for any sort of, I use the term content creator because it's just a broad term and it encompasses, I feel like, podcasting and writing and whatever. But I think the biggest lesson I've learned is like, whatever you like, there will be other people that like it, and you will find your people. And I think it's so many people try to fit themselves in a particular box and try to do what somebody else is doing, even talk like someone else is talking, especially in the podcast space. It's like people will try to pick up other personality traits from other people. It's like, you just have to be you and trust that the audience who likes you is going to find you, and they're going to respond to that authenticity of who you are. And so, you just have to be whatever. I feel like I try to chase whatever I'm into. I have celebrity guests all the time, but I try to only have the people that I'm interested in, because I feel like when I've tried to just have someone who a PR person was like, oh, do you want to have this person on? I feel like it's never good.
Mm-hmm.
The audience never likes it. But then conversely, if I have someone that I'm interested in talking to, even if they're not someone who's a big name or something, then I find the audience is really into it, because they could tell that there's a genuine connection with me and that person. And so you just have to chase you. And even early on, I remember thinking with language things,
Yeah.
even so it's so minute, but I remember there'd be certain times like, oh, maybe I shouldn't talk like that. Meaning like if I were to say a swear word or something
Yep.
like that, like, am I offending this person or that person? But then it's like, you just have to talk like I found the most success when just talking how I'm going to talk to my friends. And that is going to offend people. That there's going to be someone who doesn't like that I say the F word, or that I
Yep.
say, earlier in this conversation, I was calling myself a Midwest gal. It's like,
You can call yourself a Midwest gal here.
yeah,
It's totally
but
acceptable, Danny.
there's always going to be people who are like, oh, I didn't like how he said that, or I didn't like
Mm-hmm.
that. Or even my mom tells me that all the time. She doesn't really listen to my show, but why'd you have to say that, Dan? Or why'd you, whatever. And
Yep.
I have to say that because that's who I am. And that's where I found the most success. And I talked to, just before we got on here, I interviewed Ricky Lake, who was a talk show host in the 90s.
Yep.
And we were talking about that, of like, what is the best qualities of a talk show host? And she's like, it's just authenticity, and the audience can smell through it and see through it. And if you're not being you, then they're going to turn you off. And
Yep.
so they can feel, audiences are smart. They can feel it.
Absolutely. I think part of it too is it's like you're literally never going to please everyone. So fucking just
Mhm.
be yourself. Like it's just, and I know it's easier said than done, but I think like that's when your life changes, when you're like, no, this is who I am, and you can take it or you can leave it, and that's how
Right.
we'll go forward with it.
And
Um,
you have to trust your gut too. I mean,
yeah.
when I was writing my book, I remember there were so many stories where I was like, I don't know if anyone's going to like this, or before I got my publisher, there were so many publishers that turned it down because they didn't really get me or get the project or something. And then I was so worried about that because so many people had turned it down and said, in so many ways, this isn't good enough. And then I realized, no, the audience gets it, and they get it because it's authentic to me. And you just have to trust your gut with it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about the book because I freaking love it. And
Oh, thank you.
I went through and reread it again actually before I knew I was going to have you on here. And you talk about like the straight husbands, right? My husband, this I'm not kidding, Danny, like we will be in bed the first time I read this and I will be like belly laughing, crying. I'm like, Zach, you just need to listen to it. And I'll read it out loud to him. And he's like, okay, that guy, like, like you said, it's
Oh,
like,
thank
I
you.
think he secretly is like, okay, I think Danny's funny too. But I think what you did so beautifully in your book is, one chapter, I'm laughing my ass off. Like I'm telling you, like, I will probably laugh right now, is the chapter of the golf cart when you guys were going
Oh,
to like the timeshare, like just the funniest shit. And then the next chapter, my heart is like completely warmed, or I'm really, connecting with your vulnerability. And I just
thank you.
think like the yin and the yang of that makes it such a phenomenal read. And one chapter that really stood out to me was The Sun Will Rise, when you talked about that low depression when you were with your boyfriend, Matt, on the way to Disney World. And I really
What
resonated.
was it? What were we thinking? Like I was in the deepest throes of depression and we were like, let's go to Disneyland. Like,
Yes.
what? It sounds so
Now
stupid
it's
thinking of it,
perfect.
but
Yes. And I think the thing that really resonated with me was how you were kind of saying how you were trying to figure out if those puzzle pieces of like depression and anxiety, if that was always a part of you. And it just stuck out to me because after I had my daughter, I went through really bad postpartum depression. And I just remember being like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, I can't figure out these puzzle pieces and how they're like, what's going on. And so, I know you kind of touched on this a little bit, but as someone who's openly shared your mental health kind of struggles and ups and downs, what are the best things that have come from sharing that? Because I've got to think that you putting this out there to your listeners has had to have impacted someone in some way, but I'm sure it was also kind of scary to put it out there.
yeah, I remember I did an episode of my show like very early on where I shared my experience with depression. And then I later wrote about it in the book. But I remember just getting messages from people being like, I went through a similar situation, and everyone's cases are are different, but then also there's commonalities in all of them. And so for mine specifically, I talk a little bit about, I had these kind of crazy hallucinations and I didn't really understand them at the time. And I was so scared to say anything about them because I thought, no, I never heard of that before. I never heard somebody having a sort of a visual manifestation of the symptoms. And so I talked about it and then I heard from other people. And then once I did that and I heard from other people for the first time, then it was like, all bets are off. I'm sharing it with anyone who will listen, because then it felt good. Selfishly, it just felt good because I was hearing from people who had similar situations. So it made me feel less alone.
Yes.
And then I also felt like maybe I'm helping somebody. And I think when it comes to mental health, somebody who's never gone through depression, I think it's still very difficult for them to understand it. Whereas somebody who has gone through depression, they kind of get it right away. Like you mentioned your postpartum, and it's like, once you go through something heavy mentally like that, you get it in a way that it's hard for some people. And I'm very empathetic to people who don't. Like I have 2 older brothers, and the middle brother in particular, he's just very simple minded. Like he's nice, he's happy and lovely, and he's the best person, but he's just, he doesn't have those kinds of mental health struggles in the way that I do. And so he doesn't always get it in the way that people who get it. So I think sharing also with those people is important, so that hopefully they'll have a little more compassion for somebody else who's going through it in their life, because somebody they know is going through it. And so maybe they'll pick up the book and read it and be like, oh, I kind of get it. Or maybe this person's going through something similar to what I read in this book.
Yeah, no, I think that's so key. And it's like relieving. Like I know when I shared about my postpartum stuff, I just was the other day on the phone with one of my girlfriends who had a baby, and she's like, am I fucked up or is this PPD? I'm like, well, it's probably both now that we're parents. I feel like once you have a kid, that maybe happens, but there's just so much power in our stories.
And so much mystery too. I feel
so
like
much mystery.
Even more so, I think, with postpartum, because there's this sort of ideal we see on TV and movies where it's like, you have the baby and look how sweet everything's perfect and you love it, but that's not always the reality. And I'm not a doctor, but I imagine just like, you have a baby, there's so many different hormones. You're so off kilter from everything. I couldn't even imagine going through some of that and then having to deal with the mental aspects while also being on very little sleep and having this whole life change. Yeah.
It's a great wild ride, but it's definitely. And again, it's like, for me and my mental health struggles with that, I remember being like, okay, but I'm still working out. I still like have goals. Like I felt like I wasn't checking the boxes of it, but then internally in my head, I was like, you're the worst fucking mom. Like you're doing everything wrong. It's so easy for her. And it wasn't until I verbalized it to someone else that she was like, you need to go talk to a doctor. And I was like, oh, like, so I just think there's so much power in putting it out there.
And I always say depression is like, there's this monster inside of you or something that's able to convince you of anything. So that little depression voice or whatever it is can convince you you're the most worthless person. They could convince you that the people in your life who love you the most are evil. They could convince you that you're a terrible mother. It could convince you of all of these things. It has the most power, and it more than anything can convince you to isolate and to not go see a professional, to not tell a friend, or to not do these things.
Yep. So this is your PSA if you're listening. Go talk to someone if you feel like
just talk.
This is Danny Cait's PSA. Okay, Danny, I have to ask you this because you have the podcast, you have the book, all these amazing things. And your career, you said you've had some setbacks, you've grown, but you've had, some really amazing things that have come your way through all this hard work. You've been on The View, you've been on, you've interviewed people like Rosie O'Donnell and Andy Cohen and some of these big names of, celebrities and all of this. Are there times where you're like, holy shit, I cannot believe I'm talking to this person, or I'm on this show or whatever? Like, do you deal with imposter syndrome?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All the time. Yes.
How do you get through it? How are you like, no, I earned this? Or do you just plow through and say, I don't know?
I try to just laugh through everything. Like sometimes we just had the Emmys. Yes. It was just the Emmys yesterday. And last year I didn't do anything for the Emmys other than watch at home on my couch. But last year I did the after show for E, like I co-hosted it. And that it was like the day after I interviewed Miss Piggy. And I remember it was just like the weirdest thing. Like, I was like, what is going on? But I remember getting to the E thing, and it's so scheduled. There's a thing in your ear of someone telling you what to say. And it's so tight of like what you have to get in such little time. But I just remember kind of like laughing through it. Like, this is so silly. Like this, it's all, I don't know. It was so exciting, but also it's like, well, who cares? I mean, this is silly. I'm interviewing Miss Piggy, and I'm talking about Ted Lasso winning. Like, there's so much more important things going on that it's like, I don't know. I just try to laugh, but
I love that.
Yeah. As a pop culture junkie, it's weird sometimes when I'm interviewing someone, you mentioned Rosie O'Donnell. It's like, I was obsessed with her talk show as a kid, like truly, and still to this day. Yeah. And so that to me was just like, I couldn't even believe it. I think I had said this somewhere where it's like, I slept so good that night because it was like something that I had dreamed of. Because ever since I was a little kid, I'd lay in bed and I'd pretend I was on a talk show, or I'd, imagine these things. And it was like that night I just slept so good because it was like I checked off one of those things that I had always dreamed about.
That's so cool. So, and I mean, it's just, it's always good too when you meet someone that you think will be amazing in real life, and then they are, you're like, oh, okay, yes, this is really good.
Yeah. And I remember I did the Drew Barrymore show last year, and it was like, Drew Barrymore, like, how am I sitting here talking to her?
It's so cool. Well, and I mean, I know Miss Piggy was part of your pinnacle too.
Hey,
so
you don't even know that she was like, that was the best. That was like probably even more so than Rosie O'Donnell. It's just like talking to Miss Piggy.
This is why I love you.
Oh my God. Like so I couldn't even, and I tried so hard for like years. I tried to get one of the Muppets on my show because I love them. And it was so hard. And then finally somebody connected me, and it was like, it was the weirdest thing though. Cause it is a puppet, but you're talking to them. It's like you're talking to Miss Piggy. Like there's even in between the recording, it was like, you're still it's like Miss Piggy is getting the microphone set up, and like that, they don't break character at all. So it's like,
that is phenomenal.
Even in the in-between you're talking, and I interviewed Gonzo too. And it was like, they're not breaking character. You're talking to Gonzo the whole time.
That is truly, that is a very fun little inside scoop, because that's hilarious. I mean, Danny, someday Jessica Simpson.
Oh, I know, Cait.
I feel like she's your most, I feel like anyone who is an Everything Iconic listener is just waiting for the day that you land Jessica Simpson to come on.
I know. I've tried so hard.
We are manifesting it for you. Don't you worry.
Thank you. And I thought I was close once, but it didn't happen.
Someday you will get there. All right, Danny, I kind of want to ask you just a couple more questions about some like pop culture type things. I want to dig into it with you. Okay. And I'll do that in 1 second, because I just want to ask you kind of one final thing here is like, what is next for you? I mean, I'm sure you get asked that all the time. It's like, you've written this book, you've got the podcast. I know maybe back on tour, like what for you is something that when you look back someday, when you and Matt are like old and gray, that you're like, damn, I'm so proud that this happened. Like a big vision board item.
I want to have my own TV talk show, or my own, there's a few like TV projects I'm trying to make happen. I also have written a lot of scripted stuff that unfortunately none of it has gotten made quite yet, but I feel like I'm getting closer to getting one of those projects made. So there's a movie that's more of a drama project I wrote, and we have a great cast attached, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to shoot it sometime, but I don't know if it'll happen. But it's something that like, it's probably the thing I'm most proud of writing. I just feel like it's different than anything I've written. And also I just am really proud of it. So I'm hopeful that that'll get made. I'm working on my next book now. That is sort of a dream. It's, I guess I could tell you, it's like a holiday, it's a holiday book. So it's going to be, it's sort of similar to my first book, where it's a collection of hopefully very funny stories. And this one's going to be hopefully very funny holiday stories. So I'm a huge Christmas junkie. And so
that is wonderful.
it'll be out, I think, next year, it'll be out holiday next year. And I'm just about done with it. The first draft, because the publishing industry is really slow. But it'll be out next year, but I'm so proud of it. And I'm excited because I just love the holidays. So
yes. Does this mean to get more Linda Pellegrino stories?
There'll be more Linda stories. Yeah.
God bless her. God bless her. I love her so much.
I just love, I'm like a holiday junkie. And so
yes,
I I love the Hallmark Channel at the holidays. I love all of that. So I knew that I wanted to write a holiday book. And so I didn't know if they'd let me, but they let me. So
You're
it's
like, I'm just
coming.
gonna, what's that quote? It's like, ask for forgiveness, not permission. It's like, no, I'm just
Right,
gonna write the
right.
holiday book. And we were just saying before, Danny is putting together his Halloween tablescape. So Danny, you're entering the best time of year.
I know. Oh,
And
I love it.
probably
I
much
love it.
better that you're in LA and not the Midwest anymore, because we're all about to be like, fuck, it's freezing.
No, I'm jealous of you, Cait, because we don't get any seasons here. And so it's just hot. We just had like record heat the other last week and it was miserable. And I was doing my Halloween tablescape and it was 105 degrees outside. And I was like, this is the worst. I just want cozy, especially fall. I mean, I could do
Yes.
without the Midwest winter. I
Yep.
lived in Chicago for a while and it was just like, that was too cold, but uh, I miss the fall.
Yes. Oh, I'm already sitting here in my plaid, but um I love that too. So I'm so excited. I'm so excited for the holiday book. I will be first to pre-order that.
Thank you. I'll send you one. Yeah.
Okay, yes. All right, Danny. Some rapid fire questions that we're going to kind of mix in here. And also side note,
Okay.
the TV show, all those things, like yes to that. And I just have to say, like, again, manifesting all that for you because you deserve it and you've worked so hard and you just make so many people happy with your podcast and your platform. So the more people that you can bring your Danny Pellegrino energy to, the better.
Thank you, Cait.
Sorry, I'm
I'm
like, oh, you
trying.
better
No,
just say
I'm
that.
trying.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you.
we know it and we're cheering you on. Okay, some rapid fire questions, just, kind of, get ready for some pop culture and just also like random Dannyisms that maybe, are just fun for people to know. So
Okay.
first, what is your go-to coffee order? I know you're a Diet Coke gal, but if you're not having your
Yes.
Diet Coke.
I'm pretty, lately I've been into oat milk actually, which
Mm,
I wasn't expecting, but I am very basic when it comes to like a seasonal a coffee cocktail. I love a pumpkin spice latte if I'm going to Starbucks, a peppermint mocha if I'm going to Starbucks. If I'm at home, I'll usually do a regular K-cup. I'll put some Coffee Mate. I love the sugar-free Coffee Mate creamers.
ooh.
Particularly, I love the pumpkin or the peppermint mocha, but they only have the sugar-free around the holidays, which is frustrating to me, and they need to change that.
Okay,
But
so Target run after
yeah, so
this.
I'll either do the Coffee Mate or lately I've been doing oat milk, but actually Starbucks has now that you could buy at Target. It's an oat milk pumpkin creamer.
Wait, how have I not known about this?
I know it's
I
new.
my daily internal battle is, do I go to Starbucks and get more stars, or am I like, not wasting $7 on a coffee? But that's
Right.
neither here nor there. Okay, I know you've been very into your Berry boot camp, and your workouts and all those things. What is one song that is a must on your workout playlist?
Oh, I like when they've been playing Dua Lipa. Can I complain for a second? Because
Absolutely.
I don't want to say this on my show in case somebody from there listens, and it'll get me in trouble, but because I know one of the trainers does, so I
Yep,
feel like I can't say this, but
absolutely.
today they played a playlist that was Queen remixes. So the group Queen,
Yep.
it was remixes in honor of the Queen passing. And it was just inappropriate.
Yeah, probably
And
not.
B, a whole hour of like, we will rock you remixes. Like, I can't do it, Cait. Like, I was miserable the whole class. And
You're
I
like,
was so
where is
mad.
Mariah?
I was so mad. I'm like, please just give me Beyonce, give me Mariah, give me
Yep.
some sort of pop diva. Instead, we're listening to like, and no offense to Queen, God bless the group, but I don't know. I can't do 60 minutes of We Will Rock You remixes. Like it
Yeah,
was
no.
the worst thing I'd ever heard in my life. And he was like, go follow the playlist on Spotify. I was like, I will
You're like, I
never.
will not be doing that. It is funny
So
that you mentioned the actual like England queen, because I have like, you get in your rabbit holes of like pop culture. I immediately started The Crown once she died. And I cannot stop watching. And Zach is like, what are you doing every night? I'm like, well, I need to Google what is real and what's not. And like
yeah, you got to figure it
I'm on
out.
like royal Twitter, like nonstop right now. I'm like, okay, I have a deep obsession all of a sudden. So, well, I
I
studied
love
abroad in
it.
London, but it's uncovered now since, again, rest in peace.
Are you on season 1 of The Crown?
I just started season 2
Okay. I
and
only watched the first season, but I always want to get back into it. I liked it.
I'm
I just,
into it.
okay.
But I
Okay.
think it's just because, the hype of everything else. And then I'm just like in the like you can go
Yeah.
down a rabbit hole, Danny, let me tell you.
I get it.
Um
But in terms of the workout though,
yes.
I just want a pop diva. Like
Yes.
it could just be any female fast beat.
Yes.
And I love when classes do a throwback. Like I love a late 90s boy band
Yes.
minute or something like that.
We have similar workout playlists, I think. There is no Queen on mine. I can tell you that
Oh,
confidently.
I know. But, and also it was just so inappropriate. It was like in honor of the Queen, like we're listening to Queen, like in honor of her passing, we're gonna memorialize her at Barry's boot camp. Like what? So crazy.
I mean, make
Okay,
it make
it's
sense.
crazy.
That is a bit crazy, but maybe he had
And
too
no
many of
one
those
knew what
K
to do.
cups.
Like everyone was just sitting there like, what the fuck is he saying? Like, what
Like,
is
I don't
the
see how this correlates, but I guess I'll go run on my
like
treadmill.
you could look at everyone on the treadmill, it's like look like turn to each other like what? Like and no one knew exactly how to react. Like, did he just say that? And then I guess he said that. And then it was like, we will rock you. And
Yeah, I feel like that's not a very good running playlist either, but
no,
proud of you
okay.
I'm proud of you for pushing
It
through.
was the worst one I've ever done, truly there. And it was just this morning before we got on here.
Oh, well, hopefully tomorrow or whatever day you go next will be better.
We're mountain
Okay,
goats, yes.
Danny, mountain or beach vacation?
Beach.
I
Yeah.
mean, LA.
I'm yeah.
Now,
Hawaii is my favorite place, and I
mm,
like it because it's so easy to be relaxed there because I tend to be a high energy type A kind of person. And so I feel like you're forced to be relaxed in Hawaii. And I like just sitting, reading a book on the beach. Like that's the only thing I want to do on vacation is like read a book.
yes, same. And then are you like this, Danny? I like with your book, for example, I was like, no, I'm going to read it in like a day. Like I need to finish it. I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
when I get
Yeah.
a book in front of me, I'm like, this is not going to linger. Like, let's go and get it done.
It's so satisfying to finish a book too. I
It
think it's
is.
like the best feeling in the world when I like a physical copy, and when you're
Yes.
closing it, oh, I love it.
Yes. And one thing that has helped me with that is I don't know if you ever feel like you get like a book hangover where you're like, "Oh, I'm sad it's done." If I have another book ready, I'll start
Mhm.
reading the first chapter of the next one and that helps me not like be sad that the other one is over.
Totally.
Side note.
I'm reading
Um
this like Christmas rom-com right now, and it's making me in the holiday spirit. And I should not be reading it because again, it's September, and it's disgusting that I'm reading this. But it's just giving me the warm and fuzzies. And then I close it after I read a few chapters, and I look outside and it's 105 degrees.
what, I feel like after the pandemic, it's like whatever gets you through the day, just do it. Like
Truly.
if you want to listen to Christmas music now or whatever, have at it.
Totally.
Okay, we're gonna do a little bit of like a Bravo, Danny's take on this. So if you could bring back one Real Housewife, any franchise, any year, who are you like, no, she needs to come back?
I would love to see Alex McCord
Mm,
back on Real Houses of New York, just because I'm curious what she's up to. I know she's in Australia and she's like a licensed therapist now, I believe, I don't know. She's,
really?
yeah, doing some sort of good work there. And so I would like to know. I'd like to bring like a Brandy and Kim Richards back to Beverly Hills Housewives because I feel like
Yes.
we need someone to spice things up and move things along a little bit.
Yes. Well, that's actually one of my questions is do you feel like Beverly Hills can survive without Bamboozled Jane and the Fox
Oh,
Force 5? Because I
I
feel like they
hope
bring the
so.
drama, but
I
also I'm
know.
over them.
I just think they need like a better firecracker in there. Like
Yes.
I don't I think they can all stick. I hope they all don't stick around. But I think if they are going to stick around, then we're going to need people like a Brandy or someone who's not afraid of them. And maybe that's not Brandy because maybe she would go in and be friendly
Yeah.
with them or whatever. But we do just need Sutton and Garcelle are doing their best. But
Yes.
I just think we need a stronger like firecracker
Yep.
presence.
I agree. Although I don't want them to get rid of Dorit purely because everything iconic needs to have your Dorit
Oh,
voice.
thank you. She's so fun to watch and like just
Oh my
laugh
gosh.
at. Oh, I love it.
Yes. It's so good. Okay, this one is a little bit more inappropriate. So F Mary Kill, Shep Craig Austin from
How could you
Summertime.
do that? That's a wrap on this, Cait. How could you do this to me?
I
This
will
is the
tell you that
meanest
this
question.
this one came from my diehard Bravo girlfriends. Like you need, and you can also, you can plead the fifth if you do need to, because it
Wait,
is
who told you to ask me this? Can I yell
my
at
friend,
them?
yeah, Becca.
Becca, how dare you?
How dare you?
This is truly the worst question ever because it's impossible. I would want it.
Correct.
I mean, I suppose, yeah, like fuck Craig
Yeah.
because he's the hottest.
Yep.
But then I can't do anything with either two of the others. I like literally, I can't,
He
Becca,
cannot.
I can't because also I met Craig in person once and he's like better looking in person somehow and like taller than he looks on TV. I think
Yep.
because those other two are tall. Yeah, so Craig would be the only one,
And
and
then
I would only
Austin,
want
and
to,
we just
yeah,
get rid of them on our TV screens forever.
just please. I
I
can't.
I feel the same way.
I'm
I
sort of okay.
feel the
Can I
same way.
just
Yeah.
because you told me this, I'm going to say
Yes.
something controversial.
Ooh, let's hear it.
I sort of kind of like understand the Whitney thing. Moving on. Okay.
Mm,
Forget I said that. Erase
it's an
that from
interesting take.
consciousness.
No, I'm not going to erase it. Now I'm going to observe Southern Charm a bit differently as I keep
You
watching.
know, so I suppose I would say I would fuck Craig, marry Whitney,
Yeah.
and
Oh
then
yeah.
because then also you get to be
You
like,
get Pat.
you get Patricia. So it's like
Yes.
that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I like it. I like the curveball you just gave me there, Danny. Um, okay.
Thank you, Becca.
Thank you, Becca. Yeah, she's gonna be so happy. Okay, when you were promoting, how do I unremember this? This is in my brain because you stayed at Miss Dorinda Medley's house, which at Bluestone Manor. And so I need to know, what did it smell like? And what like what was that experience like actually staying at the legendary Bluestone Manor?
It was
Just
so amazing. I think I was like a little, I was high emotion because it was right before my book tour started and before I was doing all this press and stuff. So I was just so on edge in
mhm.
general. And Dorinda could not have been nicer. And also it was perfect to go there before all of that because she really like calmed me down. We went on like a walk and it's so secluded, so quiet there. So it really was so nice. And I think I've said this before, but it's like her house, I don't think it looks as good on TV as it does in person because everything is like really rich in there
Yeah.
and it's very sturdy and cozy and each room is different. And I like that the design of it is kind of weird. And I find that too many houses do like the farmhouse thing
Yeah.
now. And so
Yep.
hers is like has it
Character.
just has character to it. And so it was beautiful. And Len was there and Dorinda cooked a dinner for me
Oh,
and
that's so nice.
she was so nice. And yeah, just really rich though. I stayed in the fish room and I was like, what are these sheets? Because I stayed in this bed and it was I haven't told anyone this yet, but the bed was so comfy. And I was talking to Jordan. I was like, oh, this is the most comfortable bed. Like, where are these sheets from? Like, I was so prepared to like invest in my bedding at home because I
Yes.
was like, I've never been in a bed this comfortable or cozy. And then I was like, so what are these sheets? And they were like, I might be saying this wrong, fret or fret.
I've never heard of
It's
that.
it's Frette.
Okay.
They're like rich people sheets.
Mm,
And so
mhm.
I looked them up and I was prepared on the website that morning. I was going to buy them. And they were like $6,000 or something, or maybe even more than that. Like the ones that she had on the sheet were so expensive. And I was like, oh, I can't buy these. Like
Yeah.
it cost more than my first car. They might have even been like $10,000 with me. Like they were just some absurd amount of money that I was like, there's no way I can buy these sheets. Like
Yeah.
we cannot do it. But I was
That's not
prepared
something you
to.
find on a home goods run there, Danny.
No, nothing there was. And I think on TV, it doesn't photograph as rich as it is. And I think because there's so many rooms,
Yeah.
it doesn't look as big because it's not open floor plan, but it feels huge when you're
I mean, if I could, yeah, if the walls could talk of that house, which I
you
suppose they
know.
did during Ultimate Girls Trip, but, um, all right. This is my last one. If someone's going to watch Real Housewives, Danny, and they've never watched it before, and this is a losing battle in my household because I'm trying to convince my husband, I'm like, no, dude, you would actually think it's funny. Like, whatever. What is your
Yeah.
opinion of where someone needs to start? And you could
Well,
give a couple options.
yeah, I think if they're like your husband, Matt, my boyfriend, doesn't really love. He he watched like early season Housewives, but then he fell off. But he really got into Salt Lake last season with all
Mm,
the Jen Shah drama. So I think sometimes for the husbands or someone who's into like a murder mystery or they like that kind of legal drama stuff, I think Salt Lake City is a great place to go. And there's not many seasons, and I think it's great. And that tends to be popular with uh, people who like, I don't know, that kind of stuff. I also love early New York is my favorite. So I think you could start with season 1 or season 2. To me, season 3 is the best season of New York. And also what I like about it is it sort of was the blueprint. It was the first housewife vacation
mm,
that they took where it was like a filmed vacation. It was the Scary Island trip and it's sort of an infamous
classic.
trip. So, and that really set the mold for all the housewife vacations that came after that. I think the Cancer Brooks years of Orange County
Yes.
were really amazing, like some of the best. I think that was around season 8-ish, maybe.
Yep.
Potomac is always good. I think it's like probably the most consistent.
Yes. Always so
Early,
good.
early Atlanta is, I mean, see like I could do all
Yeah,
of
I
them
know.
have
I
their,
know. They're all see, and that's the thing that's like, this is like one of the things that I get shit for of like, yeah, Cait and her Real Housewives. I'm like, but like you don't understand the
I
layers.
know
Like
they're
it
so
goes,
good.
it runs
You
so
should,
deep.
a good starter for people usually too is Beverly Hills because it's got like the actor connection. So
Yeah.
even if you don't watch Housewives, you kind of understand who those women are and it's glamorous, but then there's also good stuff under the surface.
Well, and I think for any of the listeners here, it's like if you start now, you can go listen to Danny's recaps because they're actually what make it even funnier. Because I'm like, okay, this is gonna be good.
You people gotta watch Salt Lake City though. I just
Yes,
watched the premiere of season 3. I just watched it and it's so good, Cait.
I
And
cannot wait.
it blew me away. Like the opening of it, I was just like, man, this is so well produced. It was just so good.
And it
It's so
makes you
good.
want to go to
So
the mountains too. Whenever I watch it, I'm like,
yeah,
we've done like a New Year's Eve ski trip out there before, and it was stunning. I'm like, oh, the backdrop of it it's so good.
beautiful.
So, so good. Danny, you are just so awesome. I appreciate you being
Thank you,
here and
Kate.
just everything that you're putting out there. It makes people so happy and um it makes me happy. And I hope that anyone else here who goes and follows you can just kind of get a little slice of the joy that you bring to everyone.
Thank you, Kate. Well, it was such a pleasure talking to you, and
Yes,
I am such a fan now, and I'm grateful that you had me on and took the time.
of
Thank you.
course. Danny, where can everybody find you? And I'll link this in the show notes. But if people want to follow along with your adventures and your takes and all
Right.
those things.
Yeah, I'm at Danny Pellegrino on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And then my podcast is called Everything Iconic. And my book is called How Do I Unremember This? And people can there's an audiobook or get the hardcover right now. It's $12.99 on Amazon. It's
Oh,
on
nice.
special right now. So please go buy it.
Yes.
And yeah, that's where you can find me. Oh, and one thing I do want to say to
Yes.
everyone who's listening right now, if you are listening to this podcast and you're enjoying this podcast, please go rate and review Cait's podcast on Apple or wherever you listen. I know people say that, podcasters say that all the time, but it's so important. It's so helpful to get your podcast out there and to get other people to help. It helps the other people discover your podcast. And when people are searching podcasts and they could read the reviews. So only a 5-star rating.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's all people we're asking you to do. But please, it takes like 2 seconds. And I know you hear podcasters say that all the time and you probably roll your eyes, but it's very, very helpful. So go rate and review Cait's podcast right now.
Oh my gosh, Danny, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Cait.
All right, guys, we'll see you later.